If you ask me what the biggest regret of my life is, I would not tell you about a job I lost or a class I failed or a place I never got to see. I would tell you about three words. Three simple words I carried inside me for 4 years and never once let leave my mouth. My name is Kabir, and this is the story of the words I never said. Her name was Anya. We met in our first year of university in a class neither of us particularly cared about, sitting 2 seats apart by pure chance. She borrowed a pen from me on the second day. She never gave it back. I never asked for it back either. Somehow, that small, unreturned pen became the beginning of everything. We became friends slowly, the way real friendships often do, not in one dramatic moment, but in 100 small, ordinary ones. Walking to class together, sharing notes, sitting in the same corner of the library during exam season, not always talking, just existing quietly in each other's company. I do not remember the exact day I realized I loved her. It did not arrive suddenly. It grew slowly, the way morning light grows across a room, so gradual that you cannot point to the moment darkness became day. By the middle of our second year, I knew completely. I loved her laugh, which came easily and often. I loved the way she argued about small things with complete seriousness, as though the correct way to cut an apple was a matter of great importance. I loved that she remembered small details about my life that I had only mentioned once in passing. I loved her, and I said absolutely nothing about it for 4 entire years. I want to explain why, because the reason was never simple. Part of it was fear, the ordinary fear anyone might feel. The fear that saying those words could break something already good, could turn easy friendship in a difficult silence. But there was something else beneath that fear, something I did not fully understand until many years later. I believed, somewhere deep inside myself, that if I said nothing, I could never truly be rejected, as long as the words stayed inside me. Unspoken, they remained safe. They remained mine, untouched by reality, untouched by her answer, whatever that answer might be. This felt, at the time, like protection. It did not feel like loss. I told myself I would say something eventually, when the timing felt right, when I felt braver, when some invisible signal arrived, telling me this was finally the moment. That signal never came, because I now understand it was never going to come from outside me. It could only have come from inside, and I never gave myself permission to create it. There were moments, many of them, when the words came close to the surface. Once during our third year, we sat on the steps outside the library at midnight after a long night of studying together. The campus was empty. The sky was unusually clear, full of stars that were rarely visible through the city's light. She looked up and said quietly, "I think this is one of my favorite moments of university. Just this. Nothing special happening. Just sitting here, I looked at her, and the words rose up in my chest, right to the edge of my mouth. I love you. I have loved you for a long time. I felt them forming, felt my lips almost shaping the first word. And then I said, yeah, me too. It's nice. Nice. I called it nice. For years of feeling, reduced in that moment to one small, forgettable word. She smiled, completely unaware of what had almost happened beside her, and we sat there a while longer before walking back to our rooms. In comfortable silence, the kind of silence I now understand was full of everything I had failed to say. There was another moment near the end of our final year when she was going through a difficult time. Her parents were separating, something she rarely spoke about, but that evening she did. We sat in a small cafe, and she cried quietly, and I reached across the table and held her hand, and for a moment, everything felt clear and simple and true. Thank you for being here, she said. I don't know what I would do without you, Kabir. You're the most important person in my life right now. The words rose again, stronger this time, closer to the surface than they had ever been. You're the most important person in my life, too. You have been for years. I love you, Anya. But I looked at her tear-streaked face, and I told myself this was not the right moment. She was hurting. She needed a friend right now, not a confession that might complicate everything further. So I said, I'm always here. Whatever you need. True words. Kind words. But not the words that lived closest to my heart. Graduation arrived faster than either of us expected. She had accepted a job in another city, for hours away by train. I had decided to stay, to pursue further studies in the same city where we had spent 4 years together. The night before she left, we met one final time at the same library steps where we had sat that midnight years earlier. I'll miss this place, she said. I'll miss us doing this. Just talking about nothing important. This was it. I knew it with a clarity I had never felt before. This was the last moment. Tomorrow, she would be gone, and whatever version of someday I had been waiting for would be gone with her. I opened my mouth. Anya, I need to tell you something. She looked at me, curious, completely unprepared for what was coming. Because in 4 years, I had given her no real reason to expect it. And then I did not fully understand this moment. Even now, even after everything, the fear returned larger than it had ever been, standing directly between me and the words I had carried for so long. I just wanted to say, I continued, my voice suddenly smaller than I intended, that these 4 years meant a lot to me. You're a really good friend. Friend. I chose that word. In the single moment I had spent 4 years preparing for, I chose the smallest, safest word available to me. She smiled, warmly, completely without suspicion. You too, Kabir. I'm so glad we met that first day. Best pen I ever lost. We laughed, and the moment passed, closing over the unsaid words like water, closing over a stone thrown into a lake, leaving barely a ripple on the surface. The next morning, she left for her new city, and the words I never said left with her, unspoken forever, exactly the way I had kept them for 4 entire years. I want to tell you what happened after, because I think this part matters just as much as the years before it. We stayed in touch at first. Messages, occasional calls. Slowly, as happens with distance, the conversations grew shorter, less frequent. A year later, she mentioned casually in a message that she had started seeing someone. 2 years later, she was engaged. I sent a message of congratulations, warm and sincere, and closed my phone and sat with a feeling I did not have adequate words for, even in a language I had studied my whole life. It was not simple heartbreak. It was something quieter and in some ways heavier. It was the specific grief of knowing that I had never given either of us the chance to know what might have happened had I simply spoken. Not that speaking would have guaranteed anything. She might not have felt the same way. The friendship might have grown strange and complicated. There were 100 ways it could have gone, and I had eliminated every single one of them simply by choosing silence again and again for 4 years. I sat with this grief for a long time, longer than I am entirely comfortable admitting. And slowly, out of that sitting, a question began to form inside me, quiet at first, then increasingly impossible to ignore. What else in my life am I not saying? Because once I looked honestly at those 4 years with Anya, I began to notice the same pattern everywhere else, in ways I had never named before. I had never told my father that I admired him, though I did, deeply, for the quiet way he had worked his entire life without complaint. I had never told my closest friend how much his loyalty meant to me during a difficult year. I had never told my mother directly that I was afraid of disappointing her, a fear that had quietly shaped nearly every major decision of my life. I had built an entire existence around unspoken things, around words held so tightly inside me that they never once touched the air, never once reached the people who might have needed to hear them. I made a decision slowly in the months following Anya's engagement. I would not let this pattern continue unnoticed for the rest of my life. The change did not happen all at once, and it was not dramatic. It began small. I called my father one evening, and instead of our usual short exchange about work and weather, I told him something I had never said before. "I've always admired how hard you work for us," I said. "I don't think I've ever actually told you that." There was a long pause on the line. When my father finally spoke, his voice sounded different than I had ever heard it. Rougher, full of something he was clearly working hard to hold steady. "Thank you, Beta," he said. "That means more than you know." We had never spoken to each other quite like that before. Something shifted between us in that phone call, something that 4 years of comfortable, careful silence had never once created. I began doing this in small ways with different people over many months. I told my closest friend plainly how much his presence had meant to me during a hard year of my life. He laughed, embarrassed, the way men often are when handed sincerity without warning, but I could see it landed somewhere real inside him. I told my mother about the fear I had carried for years, the fear of disappointing her, a fear I had never once spoken aloud in my entire life. She cried and held my hand and told me something I had needed to hear for a very long time. That her love for me had never once depended on any achievement at all. Each time I spoke words I had previously kept silent, something inside me grew a little lighter. Not because the words fixed everything. Some conversations remained difficult even after being spoken, but because I was no longer carrying the double weight of the feeling itself and the silence around it. I still think of Anya sometimes, not with the same sharp ache I once felt, but with a quieter kind of tenderness, the way you might remember an important lesson learned at real cost. I do not know what would have happened had I spoken that night on the library steps, or that evening in the small cafe, or that final night before she left. I will never know. That particular door closed permanently the moment she boarded her train, and I have made my peace with never opening it again. But I know this clearly now in a way I did not before. Silence does not protect you from loss. It simply guarantees a different, quieter kind of loss. The loss of never knowing, the loss of never having tried, the loss of words that mattered, left forever unheard by the people who needed to hear them. If you're carrying words you have never said to someone you love, to a parent, to a friend, to anyone who matters to you, I want to ask you something gently. What are you actually protecting by staying silent? Is it truly them you are protecting? Or is it yourself from a small and survivable moment of vulnerability? Because I promise you, from the other side of 4 years of silence, the discomfort of speaking honestly is almost always smaller and shorter than the weight of carrying unspoken words for years, sometimes for an entire lifetime. You do not need the perfect moment. I waited for that moment for 4 years, and it never once arrived on its own. You simply need to choose, on some ordinary day, to let the words leave your mouth imperfectly, honestly, before the moment quietly closes forever, the way mine did on a library step under a rare clear sky for years and 3 words too late. I'm Kabir, and this has been Simply Listen. If this story reached something quiet inside you, please like this video and share it with someone who might be carrying their own unspoken words. If there is someone you need to say something to, tell me in the comments below. You do not need to share their name. Just the words themselves, said out loud here, might be the first small step. Thank you so much for listening today. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next story.